Okay, because again, this is why it's the menstrual cycle. So if you don't have estrogens that stimulate the growth of new and mitotic growth, if you don't have progesterone to maintain and thicken this layer, if you lose both of these that are keeping the endometrium or the functional layer of the endometrium, it's going to shed. And if it sheds, what happens? Well, where are these cells? And notice that these blood vessels, they're also degrading as well. Where are all these cells and blood going to go? They're going to go out of the uterus, right? Because there's no hormones that are, there's a drop in the hormones that were keeping them maintained. All right, so then this is a very important topic. So if I just search for, I mean, it's like regardless of group, regardless of week, there's always a menstruation question. So this is a very important topic, and this is why I'm trying to spend the whole lecture talking about menstruation because it is an important topic. I mean, it affects actually the balance of male to female in our class is female dominant. So yeah, even in like Phil 141, we had like, I just look up the word period and there were like 72 different questions about it. So it's obviously a very important topic. So what does that mean? Well, or before you even get to the menstrual phase, what happens with estrogen and progesterone? So during the proliferative, where the endometrium is growing, and the secretory phase, where it's starting to build up and build more of these glands that help to make the endometrium more suitable for implantation. So estradiol, very important in regenerating the endometrium. Progesterone, very important in building it up further and increasing the glands and all the things that the blood vessels and everything that helps to maintain the endometrium and make it suitable for a potential implantation. Now, what happens during the menstrual phase? Well, you get a drop in estrogen, you get a drop in progesterone. So if you get a drop in estrogen or estradiol, what's that going to do? Well, remember, estradiol was the hormone that was causing and triggering the initial regeneration, right? So with low estradiol, you have low regeneration and endometrial growth. With progesterone, what was that doing? Well, it was maintaining the uterine lining, building it up, but also inhibiting contractions. So again, with instead of being progestation, if you have a drop in progesterone, you have no gestation. Why? Because again, it's like throwing out the baby with the bathwater. Say there was a fertilized egg, but then you have a drop in progesterone. That endometrial layer is not going to be hospitable and it's going to be like being shed while you're trying to implant an embryo. So again, progesterone is necessary for maintaining the endometrial layer. And if you lose that, and what else does progesterone do? Well, it also inhibits uterine contractions of the myometrium. So if you have loss in progesterone, which calms the myometrium down, what's going to happen to the myometrium? It's going to contract. So that's what causes cramps. The myometrium and a drop in progesterone is going to cause menstrual cramps. And you may be like, oh, is this just our uterus playing tricks on us and trolling us? Well, think about this way. If you're trying to shed cells and menstrual blood, does it make sense to just like let it stay there or help it along? Because that's the whole physiology behind cramps, is that it's not only caused by a loss in progesterone, but since you're actively trying to shed this old endometrial layer, the cramps actually help to move along that layer and excrete it out of the body. So this is the whole reason behind the cramps and menstruation. Now, the histology of the uterine wall. So we did cover the endometrium and the myometrium. Again, the myometrium, that's the muscular layer. The endometrium does have two sublayers. So you have the functional layer and the basilar layer. So if you remember the integumentary system and the epidermis, you may have remembered the stratum basale. That's the part that regenerates. So the functional layer, that's the part that regenerates every menstrual cycle, but is also sloughed off with every menstrual cycle. The basilar layer does not get shed. So the entire endometrium, like if this shed off, then you wouldn't have any more endometrium. You need something to start over again. So the basilar layer stays there regardless of where you are in the menstrual cycle, but the functional layer is the part that regenerates every menstrual cycle. And we're running out of time again. If you, or actually, I think if you, oh yeah, lab exams are over. So if you can stay, you can stay. But let's just try to get through the rest of the plans I have for the menstrual cycle and everything else. All right, so menstruation. Oh, so let's do a quick top hat question. On average, let's bring up our browser. Okay, on average, a woman loses about how much total menstrual blood volume per menstrual period? And you might be like, oh, I'm American, I don't know anything about the metric system. Okay, that's not kind of mean. But yeah, so for reference sake, this is 50 mils over here. So 50 mils, I don't know if you can kind of see it here. So it's not working. This is 50 mils of liquid. So is it less than half of that? Is it between this much? Or is it multiple of these bottles? All right, let's see what people said. So we have almost a normal distribution, and the average amount of menstrual fluid is around 60 to 80 mils. So that's how much we see lost in a typical period. Okay, you can close top hat for now because I think that's the only question that I had for that. But back to our presentation. And I kind of gave it away. So heavy menstrual bleeding in general, and this is like, I think the article was in 2018. I had trouble actually finding an American source, but this is from the United Kingdom NHS, the National Health Service. They say like define menstrual bleeding as more than 80 mils of total menstrual blood in a period. So this would be like maybe 2 of these. Like that would be 100 mils. So that's how much heavy menstrual bleeding would be. Or if you want to convert it to cups, something we're more familiar with in America, is like around 1/3 of a cup. So most women, they say more than half of women, they don't lose that much. So that's why that 80 mils is kind of like, I know it's actually very interesting when I was like trying to find what's the definition of heavy flow. Then I think there's a lot, even in like 2018 and 19, they're still coming up with, there's different ways to measure this. Like, I mean, it kind of makes sense. Like, do you want to be carrying around that fluid all day long? So they're trying to find, there's different medical and scientific methods of trying to measure the total menstrual blood that a woman does in a single period. Very fascinating stuff.